The accidental discovery. Forget everything you know about modern brewing. There are no stainless steel vats, no commercial yeast packets, and no thermometers. To understand how the first beer was made, you have to look at the world through the eyes of a gatherer 10,000 years ago. The discovery of alcohol was not a deliberate chemical experiment, it was a beautiful, accidental convergence of rain, wild grains, and the microscopic life floating in the prehistoric air. Imagine a clay vessel, hand-coiled and baked in an open fire, left out near a shelter. Inside are wild barley seeds and crude wheat grains gathered from a nearby riverbank. A sudden torrential downpour fills the vessel to the brim. The gatherers move on, forgetting the container for several days under the hot sun. When they return, something strange has happened. The water is no longer clear. It is bubbling, frothy, and the sharp, sweet, slightly pungent aroma wafts from the jar. A curious individual dips a hollow reed or a wooden spoon into the liquid and drinks. Within an hour, the world shifts. A strange warmth spreads through their chest. Anxiety fades. The tribe gathers closer around the fire, feeling an inexplicable sense of connection and euphoria. They did not invent beer, they discovered a natural phenomenon. To recreate this today, you must abandon the sterile controls of the modern kitchen and embrace the chaotic, beautiful world of wild fermentation. The secret to this ancient brew lies entirely in what our ancestors could see, touch, and gather within a single day's walk. You need wild grains. Modern malted barley is engineered for high efficiency, but ancient humans used wild einkorn, emmer, or wild barley. These grains were tough, tightly husked, and required physical labor to process. You cannot simply boil these grains. First, they must be cracked. Prehistoric brewers used large, hollowed-out stones called querns. By rubbing a smaller, rounded stone against a grain on the rock bed, they fractured the outer holes without turning the grain into fine flour. This coarse crushing is vital. It exposes the starches inside the seed while creating a natural filter bed of husks that allows liquid to strain through. Take your coarsely crushed ancient grains and place them into your vessel. The choice of vessel dictates the flavor and success of the brew. A porous clay pot is ideal because its microscopic pockets retain the yeast from previous successful batches, acting as a living starter culture. If clay is unavailable, a hollowed-out log or a large, flexible sheet of birch bark stitched together with pine resin works perfectly. Foraging the natural catalysts. Grains alone do not easily ferment without an external push of sugar and wild microorganisms. In the wild, sweetness is a luxury, found only in ripe fruits, wild berries, and the occasional beehive. To kickstart the fermentation and mask the harsh, bitter flavors of wild grains, our ancestors turned to the forest floor. You must forage for high-sugar catalysts. Gather wild blackberries, raspberries, elderberries, or juniper berries. Look for fruits that possess a visible, dusty white film on their skins. This powdery coating is not dirt. It is a dense, concentrated colony of wild Saccharomyces yeast and Lactobacillus bacteria, perfectly engineered by nature to consume sugars and produce alcohol and lactic acid. Do not wash these fruits. Washing strips away the very life force required to ferment the liquid. Crush the berries directly into the cracked grain mixture using your bare hands. The warmth of your skin introduces additional local microbes, making the brew a literal reflection of your physical environment. To elevate the sugar content and guarantee a stronger, more vigorous fermentation, ancient brewers frequently sought out wild honey. Honey was a sacred substance, a gift from the sky. It is packed with complex sugars that wild yeast can feast on for weeks. Pouring raw, unpasteurized honey into the mixture does two things. It provides immediate food for the yeast before the grain starches have fully broken down, and it introduces its own set of wild floral yeasts. Along with sweetness, you need bittering agents and preservatives. Long before hops were discovered in medieval Europe, prehistoric humans used a blend of wild herbs, a mixture often referred to in later history as groot. Walk through the woods and gather wild yarrow, mugwort, sweet gale, or pine needles. These plants contain essential oils that naturally inhibit bad, spoiling bacteria, while allowing alcohol-producing yeast to thrive. They also add a deep, resinous, earthy bitterness that balances the intense sweetness of the honey and berries. The sacred water and malting. Water is the blood of the brew. Our ancestors did not use chemically treated tap water. They used water from moving sources, high-altitude mountain springs, clean rivers, or freshly fallen rainwater collected in stone basins. This water is alive, carrying its own profile of minerals like calcium and magnesium, which are essential for yeast health. Pour this fresh water directly over your mixture of crushed grains, smashed wild berries, herbs, and raw honey. The ratio should feel thick but fluid, resembling a thin, gritty porridge rather than a clear tea. To maximize the alcohol potential, ancient humans utilized the primitive malting process, sometimes completely by accident. When grains get wet in the wild, they begin to sprout. As the seed germinates, it activates internal enzymes that convert complex, unfermentable starches into simple, sweet sugars meant to feed the growing plant. Prehistoric people noticed that sprouted grains tasted significantly sweeter than dry seeds. To mimic this, soak your wild grains in water for 24 hours until tiny rootlets just begin to peek out of the husks. Then, spread the grains out on flat stones in the sun to dry completely, halting the growth. Once dry, gently roast them next to an open wood fire. This light roasting caramelizes the newly formed sugars, giving the final beer a rich, smoky, biscuit-like flavor profile that defines ancient primitive ales. Mashing with fire and stones. Without modern stoves, heating a large, heavy vessel of water and grain presents a massive engineering challenge. Clay pots can crack if exposed to direct, intense flames for too long, and wooden logs or bark baskets will simply burn. Prehistoric brewers solved this with a brilliant technique known as stone boiling. You must build a large hardwood fire right next to your brewing station. Gather smooth, dense river stones about the size of your fist. Avoid porous rocks like sandstone or limestone as they contain trapped moisture and can violently explode when heated. Place the river stones directly into the glowing red embers of your fire and let them heat for at least an hour until they glow with an intense internal heat. Using split wooden branches as tongs, carefully lift a glowing hot stone from the fire, knock off any loose ash, and drop it directly into the wet grain and water mixture inside your vessel. The moment the stone hits the liquid, a violent hiss erupts. The water immediately boils directly around the rock, sending plumes of sweet, smoky steam into the air. Stir the mixture continuously with a long wooden paddle. As the stone cools, remove it and drop in another hot stone. This process is called mashing. The heat activates the enzymes in the malted grain, breaking down the remaining starches into fermentable sugars. Maintain this hot, steaming state for roughly an hour. The temperature doesn't need to be precise. Your hands and eyes will tell you when it's ready. The liquid will transform from a chalky, milky white into a deep, amber-brown, sticky sweet wort. The long, bubbling silence. Cover the vessel loosely with a flat piece of slate, a large animal hide, or a thick layer of clean straw. This keeps out larger insects and dirt while allowing the gases produced during fermentation to escape safely. Move the vessel into a dark, cool place, such as the back of a shallow cave, an earthen pit dug into the ground, or a shaded thicket. Within 24 to 36 hours, you will hear the vessel come to life. A soft, steady whispering sound will emerge from the clay jar. If you lift the cover, you will see a thick, rocky, creamy foam rising to the surface, swirling with shades of pink from the berries and tan from the grains. This is the peak of wild fermentation. The wild Saccharomyces yeast is aggressively consuming the honey and grain sugars, converting them into ethanol and carbon dioxide gas. Simultaneously, wild lactobacillus bacteria are producing lactic acid, which drops the pH of the liquid, making it sour. This acidity is a survival mechanism. It creates an environment so hostile that dangerous pathogenic bacteria cannot survive, ensuring the beer is safe for human consumption. Let the brew ferment for 5 to 7 days. The aggressive bubbling will slowly subside, the heavy foam will collapse, and a thick layer of spent yeast and sediment will settle to the floor of the vessel, leaving a still, deep amber liquid on top. The sacred consumption.
Ancient beer was not aged for months in cold cellars, nor was it carbonated and bottled under high pressure. It was alive, flat, slightly warm, and consumed immediately while the yeast was still healthy. Because there were no fine modern filters, the beer was often thick, cloudy, and filled with floating bits of herbs and grain husks. To drink it, our ancestors utilized long, hollow reeds or hollowed-out bird bones as straws, plunging them deep past the floating surface debris into the clean, fermented liquid below. When you taste this wild brew, it will surprise your modern palate. It is not like a commercial lager or a heavily hopped IPA. It is deeply complex, tart, slightly sour from the wild bacteria, rich with the smoky notes of the fire-heated river stones, and subtly sweet with the residual sugars of wild forest honey and autumn berries. It carries a distinct herbal, earthy undertone from the yarrow and pine needles. This liquid was more than a beverage. It was a source of clean hydration where water sources were questionable, a dense source of B vitamins and liquid calories, and the literal conduit to the divine. By using nothing but stones, clay, fire, and the invisible life floating in the air, you have stepped backward through millennia, tapping into the exact sensory experience that sparked the dawn of human civilization.